Gunpowder doesn't wash out. Not really. You can scrub your hands until the skin splits, soap them twice, 3 times, stand under a shower until the hot water runs to cold, and still sometimes when it's very quiet and the fluorescent lights are cycling through that low 3 a.m. hum, you can smell it. Penny Okafor. No, that name's taken. Let me check the list again. Let me start the story directly. Gunpowder doesn't wash out. Not really. You can scrub your hands until the skin cracks. Use half a bottle of surgical soap. Stand under scalding water until the tank runs dry. And still, in the quiet, in the particular dead silence of a hospital at 4 a.m., you can smell it. Faint, like a memory that hasn't decided whether to stay or leave. Vera Nolan knew this the way she knew everything about her body, clinically, without sentiment. She was 38 years old and she worked the overnight shift at Mercy Ridge Medical Center in a mid-sized Ohio city that nobody particularly wanted to visit. She had been there 4 years. Before that, she had been somewhere she wasn't allowed to name, doing things that weren't officially documented, keeping people alive in conditions that would make the attending physicians at Mercy Ridge quietly excuse themselves from the room. None of that was on her badge. Her badge said, Nolan V. RN, night shift. The letters were slightly crooked because the laminator in HR had a bubble in it, and nobody had bothered to fix it in 3 years. She'd checked. She liked the badge for that reason. It was imperfect and forgettable, same as she intended to be. The supply closet on the 3rd floor smelled like saline solution and old cardboard. Vera stood inside it at 4:17 a.m., doing an inventory count that didn't strictly need to happen until Friday, because the alternative was sitting at the nurse's station listening to Darnell, the overnight security guard, narrate a reality television program to anyone who would tolerate it. Darnell was a kind man. He was also completely unable to tolerate silence, which made him, in Vera's private assessment, a unique form of exhausting. She counted gauze rolls 12, 13, 14. The radio clipped to her scrub pocket buzzed. Vera, we've got a walk-in coming through the side entrance. Can you cover triage? Kowalski's got her hands full in Bay 2. Copy, she said, and put the gauze down at 14. The walk-in was a teenage boy with a dislocated shoulders from a skateboarding accident, accompanied by a mother who had clearly been crying and was now trying to project a composure she didn't feel. Vera got the boy into a bay, assessed the joint, handed the chart off to the resident on call, a second year named Travers, who had the permanent look of a man who had just been informed of very bad news, and went back to the nurse's station. She refilled her coffee. It was from the carafe that had been sitting on the burner since 11, which meant it had the consistency and flavor of liquid tar, but she drank it standing up, both hands wrapped around the paper cup, looking out at the empty waiting room through the safety glass. 4 plastic chairs, an artificial ficus in the corner that had lost 2 of its branches, a mounted television cycling through a local news broadcast on mute, the closed captions half a sentence behind whatever the anchor was saying, a vending machine in the hallway beyond, humming a slightly different frequency than the overhead lights, which created a dissonant chord that Vera had learned to tune out sometime around day 3. She had learned to tune out a great many things. "You're doing the stare again," said a voice beside her. That was Priya Menon, day shift spilling into a double, because one of the other nurses had called out sick. Priya was 26, recently engaged, and operated on a principle of radical optimism that Vera found simultaneously baffling and quietly touching. She wore her dark hair in a braid that was always coming slightly loose by hour 6. and she had a habit of narrating her own actions while she charted, like a cooking show host with an audience of one. "I'm looking at the waiting room," Vera said. "You're staring at the ficus like it owes you money." "It does. I've been keeping track." Priya laughed. She had a good laugh, unguarded. "Travers is asking about the shoulder kid. Says the reduction went clean. Mom's still hovering. She'll hover until he's walking out the door." Vera set down her cup. "She drove him here at 4 in the morning in her pajamas. She's not leaving early." "How do you always know that?" Vera didn't answer, because the answer was long and involved several things she didn't talk about at work, and also because the automatic doors at the far end of the corridor opened just then, and the sound of them, the specific mechanical sigh of the pneumatic hinges, followed by the particular weight of footsteps on linoleum, made something in her go absolutely still. She didn't turn her head, not yet. She adjusted the angle of her coffee cup slightly, using the reflection in the safety glass like a rear-view mirror. 3 people. 2 men and a woman. They weren't patients. She knew this before she had consciously processed any individual detail. Patients moved differently, hunched around pain, or brittle with fear, or slack with the resignation of the chronically ill. These 3 moved like people who were accustomed to entering rooms and immediately understanding where all the exits were. The woman in front was compact and straight-backed, maybe early 40s, with a prosthetic arm from the elbow down. Carbon fiber, matte black, the kind built for function rather than cosmetic approximation. She walked without favoring it. She'd had it long enough that it was just part of her body. The man to her left was tall, military haircut gone slightly soft at the edges, a scar running from his left jawline into the collar of his jacket. Not a clean scar, a burn, the kind that healed in its own irregular geography. The third was younger, mid-30s maybe, with a stillness about him that Vera recognized immediately and didn't particularly want to examine. Her fingers tightened slightly on the paper cup. "Can I help you?" Priya called from the triage window, her voice professional and bright. The woman in front stopped. She looked at the window, then, with a very specific, deliberate kind of patience, she looked past it. Her eyes swept the nurse's station in a single arc. They stopped on Vera. Vera set the coffee cup down on the counter. Slowly. "We're looking for a nurse," the woman said. Her voice carried, not loud, just precisely projected. "Works the overnight shift. Name is Nolan." Priya glanced sideways. "Oh, that's actually, I know who it is," Vera said quietly. She came around the counter. She didn't run. Running caused panic, and panic did not help anyone. She stopped 6 feet from the 3 of them and crossed her arms over her chest, tucking her hands under her elbows where they couldn't be seen doing anything they shouldn't. The woman with the prosthetic met her eyes and held them. "Sergeant," Vera said. Her voice came out flat and controlled, the way she'd trained it to be in environments where flat and controlled was the only acceptable register. "You're a long way from the last time I saw you." "Petty officer, actually," the woman said, "as of 3 years ago, but you always called me by my last name anyway." "Garza," Vera said. Something shifted in Garza's expression. Not a smile, exactly. Something more complicated, relief and grief compressed into the space where a smile might have been. "Yeah," Garza said. "It's me." Behind Garza, the tall man with the burn scar exhaled slowly through his nose. The younger one didn't move. Vera looked at the 3 of them. She did not look at the arm. "Who told you where I was?" she asked. "Nobody told us," Garza said. "We looked. I wasn't easy to find." "No," the tall man said. "You weren't." He said it without accusation, which was somehow worse than if he'd said it with some. Vera uncrossed her arms. She looked past them at the waiting room, still empty, the ficus in the corner, the muted television, and then she looked at Priya, who was standing very still behind the triage window, with the expression of someone who has wandered into the middle of a conversation they don't have the context for, and is trying to figure out whether to interrupt. "Take Bay 6, Vera said. "It's empty and the door closes." Bay 6 was used for overflow and for conversations that needed walls around them. It had a curtain instead of a door, which Vera pulled shut anyway, and a single overhead fluorescent that buzzed at a slightly higher pitch than the rest, which she'd learned to hear as a kind of privacy. She stood. The three of them arranged themselves without being asked, the way people do when they've spent years in rooms where positions mattered. And Vera noted, against her will, how each of them had positioned themselves relative to the curtain. Old habits. "You have about 20 minutes before this stops being a place I can have a personal conversation," she said. "So." Garza looked at the man with the burn scar. A thing passed between them, the kind of look that functioned as a whole paragraph. "His name is Trevino," Garza said, nodding toward the tall man. "And this is Patel." The younger one gave a single nod. "You don't remember them." "I remember everyone," Vera said. "You remember what happened, you don't remember them specifically." Vera looked at Trevino, at the burn scar mapping its way down his jaw, at the shape of it. She ran a calculation she hadn't run in 4 years. "Forward operating base," she said. "The vehicle fire. You were in the second seat." Trevino's jaw tightened. "Yes, you had a femoral bleed and severe burns, left side of the face and neck. You were conscious." She paused. "I had to tell you to stop trying to help me." Something in his eyes broke slightly and then reassembled. "You had to tell me 3 times. "Twice," she said. "The third time you listened." Patel spoke then, for the first time. His voice was quiet and even. "I was the one you went back for." Vera looked at him. She didn't say anything. "The vehicle wasn't fully clear," Patel said. "Everyone was out except me. My leg was pinned. You went back in." The fluorescent light above them buzzed. Vera breathed through it. The extraction protocol was to leave anyone who couldn't self-evacuate, Patel said. Not an accusation, a recitation of fact. "We both know that." Vera's hands were in her pockets. She pressed her fingernails into her palms and felt the specific sensation of that. Sharp, present, anchoring. "I'm a medic," she said. "I don't leave people in burning vehicles." "You got a reprimand on your file," Garza said quietly. "I got 2, we know." Garza shifted. "We requested your file, not the classified parts, the parts that were accessible. We saw the reprimands. We saw that you separated 18 months after that deployment." A pause. "We didn't know where you went after." "I went to Ohio," Vera said. "I became a nurse." "We know that now. And now you're here. And now we're here," Garza agreed. The quiet stretched. Bay 6 had the kind of quiet that Vera usually appreciated, insulated from the ambient noise of the floor, the monitors and rolling carts, and the particular percussion of a hospital at 4 a.m. Right now the quiet felt pressurized, like something was being held inside it. "Why?" Vera said. The word came out smaller than she meant it to. Garza looked at her for a long moment. "Because Patel started walking again 8 months ago. 18 surgeries. 18. And when he took his first steps in the PT gym, the thing he said was that he wanted to find the medic who went back into that vehicle." Garza stopped. Her voice had stayed level the entire conversation, but something in it shifted fractionally now. Something controlled, and then very slightly not. And because Trevino has been in a burn support group for 2 years, and 6 months ago he gave a talk at a VA, and in the talk he talked about you. She exhaled. And because I had a full prosthetic evaluation last year, and the prosthetist asked me about my functional goals, and I said I wanted to be able to shake the hand of the person who saved my life before I bleed out on a dirt road in a country I couldn't find on a map when I was 22. Vera stared at the floor. It was the gray industrial tile that every medical facility in the country seemed to use. Scuffed at the corners, a small crack running toward the wall near the base of the gurney. "Garza," she said, "don't. I want to say something. I know what you're going to say. I didn't save everyone." The room went very still. Vera raised her eyes. She looked at Garza directly because she owed her that. Kimura. He was in the third vehicle. There was internal bleeding, and I didn't. I couldn't determine the source quickly enough, and I was working with what I had on hand, and he. She stopped. She started again. I've thought about that specific sequence of decisions approximately every day for 4 years. What I should have checked first, whether a different order of operations would have changed the outcome, Patel said. We know. We've talked to the physician who reviewed the field report. She said the same thing your reprimand said, which is that given the resources available and the conditions present, no different decision would have saved him. He met her eyes. We know, Vera. The sound of her first name, from someone she didn't know well enough to give permission, it landed somewhere in her chest like a stone dropped into water. He was 24. She said. He was, Garza said, and he knew what we all knew about the work, and he would not want you to be here, doing this, carrying this. She gestured at the bay, at the hospital, at the specific way Vera was standing, which apparently communicated something legible. Alone. Vera looked at the curtain. From somewhere beyond it came the sounds of the hospital reasserting itself. A cartwheel, a voice on the overhead paging system, the beep of a monitor finding its rhythm, the whole machine of care running on, indifferent to whatever was happening in Bay 6. I built something here, Vera said. Not a defense, a statement. We see that, Trevino said. He had barely spoken and his voice was rougher than she remembered. The burn tissue having apparently done some of its work on the structures below the skin, too. Nobody's asking you to unmake it. Then what are you asking? Garza reached into the pocket of her jacket. She pulled out something small, a folded piece of paper, heavily creased, soft at the edges from handling. She held it out. Vera didn't take it. It's from Kimura's family, Garza said. His sister. She tracked us down about a year ago. She knows the basics. Not classified details, but that he died in the field, that there was a medic who stayed with him. Garza kept her hand extended, steady, the carbon fiber fingers of her prosthetic visible below the cuff of her jacket. She wrote a letter. She wanted whoever that was to have it, if we ever found them. The fluorescent light buzzed. Vera reached out and took the paper. She didn't open it. She folded it once more and held it in both hands, pressing the edge of it against her fingertips. I'm going to need you to let me. She stopped. Tried again. I need to be not here right now. For a minute. Take the time you need, Patel said. I mean, I need you to leave Bay 6. A pause. Then Garza said, Okay. They moved toward the curtain. Trevino paused, and for a moment, Vera thought he was going to say something, and she braced for it, for whatever piece of grace or absolution he thought she might need. And she already knew she was going to reject it, because that was what she had learned to do. That was what 4 years of Ohio fluorescent light quiet had made her into. Someone who knew how to deflect the things offered to her by people who meant well. But Trevino didn't say anything. He just gave her a single nod, the way soldiers nod at each other across large distances when words aren't available, and then he stepped through the curtain and was gone. Vera stood alone in Bay 6. The gurney beside her had a paper sheet on it, still crisp from the last change, and she sat down on the edge of it. It made the specific crinkling sound that hospital paper makes, and for some reason that sound, familiar, completely ordinary, the sound of 10,000 patient intakes and vital checks and nothing more serious than a sprained wrist, undid something in her chest that she hadn't intended to have undone. She held the letter. She didn't cry. That wasn't how it worked for her, hadn't been for a long time. What happened instead was that something in her central core went very still, the way a gyroscope stills when it's aligned correctly, and she sat with that stillness and breathed into it, and let herself, just for a moment, not be the nurse with the imperfect badge, and the tar-black coffee, and the careful invisibility. She was someone who had gone back into a burning vehicle because she didn't know how not to. She was someone who had stayed in the dirt with a man named Kimura for 30 minutes while the situation around her deteriorated. Because you did not leave people to die alone in the dirt. You simply did not do that. It wasn't a choice she had made. It was a fact about who she was. She was someone who had spent 4 years in Ohio wearing her absence like armor, and had been very good at it, and had occasionally, in the dark of her apartment, wondered if armor counted as living. She opened the letter. The handwriting was careful and slightly formal, the penmanship of someone who had learned it as a deliberate skill. 3 paragraphs. She read them twice. The third time she didn't read them so much as hold them, the paper soft in her hands, the words already absorbed and rearranging themselves somewhere behind her sternum. Kimura's sister had written. He talked about the medics. He wrote home about them. He said the thing that surprised him most was how calm they were. He said they were calm in a way that made everyone else calm, and that in his experience, that was the most underrated thing a person could do in a difficult situation, to be the still point. I don't know if that's something you were taught or something you are, but I wanted to say that my brother knew he was cared for. I think that matters. I think it is perhaps the most important thing. Vera sat on the gurney in Bay 6 for another 4 minutes. She knew it was 4 minutes because the paging system made 2 announcements, and the overhead light cycled through one of its brief flickers. And she had been in this hospital long enough to know the rhythms of it by heart. Then she folded the letter, put it in the pocket of her scrub top, the small one above the chest that usually held a pen, and stood up. She pushed the curtain aside. The 3 of them were in the corridor outside, not standing together but near each other. Garza looking at her phone, Trevino leaning against the wall, Patel at the window at the end of the hallway that looked out over the parking garage. They didn't arrange themselves when she appeared. They didn't perform anything. They just looked at her the way people look at someone they've been looking for a long time. There's a family waiting room at the end of that hall, Vera said. It has a coffee machine that's slightly better than the one at the nurse's station. I have approximately 12 minutes before I need to be back on the floor. She paused. If you want coffee, I can walk you down there. Garza looked at Trevino. Trevino looked at Patel. Yeah, Garza said. We want coffee. They walked down the hall together, Vera slightly ahead, her clogs making the familiar sound on the linoleum that she knew Priya could probably identify from 40 feet away. The hospital doing what it always did, moving around them, blood pressure cuffs and vital signs and the ongoing business of people in need of repair. Indifferent to the specific weight of this particular walk down this particular corridor. At the coffee machine, while it was filling the second cup, Trevino said quietly, "Do you like it?" "Here." Vera thought about it. She watched the coffee pour. "I'm good at it," she said. "That's not what I asked." She picked up the cup. The heat transferred through the thin plastic, familiar and slightly too hot, the way it always was. She held it anyway. "Some nights," she said. Trevino nodded slowly. Apparently that was a sufficient answer, or close enough to one. Garza had her coffee. Patel was standing at the window at the end of the family room, looking out at the gray pre-dawn sky going pale at the edges. He'd been a quiet person in the field, she was remembering now. Still and watchful in the way of someone who processed things on a long delay and then processed them completely. "We're not going to check on you," Garza said, not unkindly. "We found you, and we said what we came to say, and we're going to leave you alone. That's the agreement we made with each other before we came." She looked at Vera over her cup. "But I want you to know that Patel is in Cleveland, 45 minutes up the highway, and I'm in Pittsburgh, and Trevino is in Cincinnati, a beat. Not that any of that needs to mean anything." "It doesn't have to," Vera agreed. "No," Garza said. "It doesn't have to." At 5:52 a.m., she walked them back to the main entrance. The automatic doors opened and the morning air came in, cold, slightly damp, carrying the particular smell of an Ohio dawn in early March, which was mostly just cold and the faint ghost of last night's exhaust. They left without a production. Garza raised her prosthetic arm briefly at the door, an abbreviated wave. Trevino did the chin nod thing again. Patel turned once and looked at her for a moment. And she looked back, and then he walked out into the parking lot. The doors closed. Priya materialized at Vera's elbow. She had the extremely particular expression of someone who has been maintaining a professional demeanor for 45 minutes under significant personal strain. "So," Priya said. "No," Vera said, "I wasn't. Whatever you were going to say, no." Priya closed her mouth, opened it again. "Were you in the military?" Vera turned back toward the nurse's station. "For a while, and those people need their coffee machine fixed in Bay 4's family room." She picked up the chart she'd set down 45 minutes ago and clicked her pen. "The filter needs replacing. Can you put a maintenance request in before the day shift?" Priya stared at her. "Priya, on it," Priya said, and went. Vera sat at the charting computer. The blue light of the screen washed over her face, the same as it always did, the same reliable geometry of this particular corner of the world she had built for herself. She pulled up the discharge form for the shoulder kid. His name was Tyler, 16 years old, no prior injuries, healthy weight, home address in the suburb to the east. He would be sore for a week and fine after that. His mother would make him ice it more than he thought he needed to. Click, shoulder reduction successful. Click, patient discharged to parental care. Her hand went to her chest pocket once, briefly, touching the folded letter through the fabric. She left it there. At 7, the day shift arrived like a weather system, noise and movement, and the smell of actual good coffee. From the place on the corner 2 blocks down, somebody's travel mug still steaming, Vera clocked out. She got her coat from the locker and her bag and her keys. And she walked out through the side entrance into the March morning. Her car was a dark blue sedan, 8 years old, with a small dent in the rear quarter panel that she kept meaning to have fixed and never did. She unlocked it and sat in the driver's seat and didn't start it for a while. The sky was going from gray to pale, the first colorless suggestion of daylight pressing at the edges of the clouds. The parking garage across the street had its lights on still. Those yellow-orange sodium lights that made everything look like an old photograph. She took the letter out and read it again. Just the last line. I think that is perhaps the most important thing. She folded it again. She didn't put it back in her pocket. She leaned forward and set it on the dashboard, against the base of the windshield, where she could see it. Then she started the car. The heat came on. The radio, which she always kept at low volume, was playing something she didn't recognize. Piano, unhurried. She pulled out of the parking spot and turned onto the road. She drove the same route she always drove, past the diner that didn't open until 8, past the hardware store with the sign missing its second R, past the park where people walked dogs in the mornings when the weather allowed it. The city she had chosen specifically because it had no particular significance. Somewhere nobody would look for her. 45 minutes up the highway, Patel was sleeping. Or wasn't sleeping, the way veterans weren't sleeping at 7 a.m., lying in whatever dark he'd found and waiting for the day to begin. An hour east, Garza was probably driving, the way she always seemed to be driving in Vera's memory of her, moving between points, always slightly ahead of whatever was behind her. She didn't know what she was going to do with any of that. She knew she was going to drive home. She knew she was going to drink a glass of water, and maybe eat something and try to sleep for a few hours in the gray Ohio daylight. The curtains, doing what they could against the morning. She knew she was going to come back tonight at 11 and sit at the charting station and drink bad coffee and be the person the badge said she was. She knew the smell of gunpowder would probably still be there, under everything, the way it always was. But on the dashboard, the letter from Kimura's sister sat against the glass, and the morning light, thin and cold and completely ordinary, touched the edge of it. She let it.